I received $3.8 million in a wrongful termination settlement, and I told absolutely no one, except the woman who showed up at my door with 2 gas station coffees and her last $160 when I had nothing left to offer her. Before I walked into that law firm and signed the final release papers, I needed to know something. Not the version of my family they performed at birthday dinners and holiday tables, the real version. The one that answered the phone at 2 in the morning when I was stranded and scared. So I ran a test. And what I found out over the next 72 hours dismantled everything I thought I understood about loyalty, blood, and what the word family is actually supposed to mean. My name is Maya. I am 29 years old, and until 14 months ago, I was a senior graphic designer at a mid-sized marketing firm in Charlotte, North Carolina. I had built my entire career there from a junior intern position, working 60-hour weeks, winning 3 consecutive internal awards for outstanding creative output. None of that mattered on the Tuesday morning. My manager called me into her office and told me my position had been eliminated less than 48 hours after I had formally reported the company's director of marketing for repeated workplace harassment. The timing was not a coincidence. My attorney proved it was not a coincidence. After 12 brutal months of depositions, sleepless nights, and more than one phone call where I sat on the bathroom floor because I didn't have the energy to sit anywhere else, a federal judge agreed. The settlement landed in my account on a cold Thursday in February. $3,800,000 after taxes and legal fees, sitting in a bank account no one in my family knew existed. Before I hired a financial advisor or told a single soul, I needed to answer one question about the people who had spent my entire adult life suggesting that my career choices were evidence of poor judgment. I grew up in a 3-bedroom house outside Atlanta, the youngest of 3 children. My mother, Linda, was a retired office administrator who had spent 30 years building a very specific version of herself inside the neighborhood she lived in. My older sister, Danielle, was the family's proof of concept, a financial consultant who drove a leased BMW and posted carefully composed photos from beach trips she couldn't quite afford. My older brother, Kevin, mostly stayed quiet and laughed at whatever Danielle said. I was the one who studied design. I was the one who moved to a different city for a job, in a field my mother introduced to her friends with a vague wave of her hand and the phrase, "She does something creative." I was the family footnote. When I lost my job, I survived on savings for 3 months before the savings ran out. I called my mother twice during that period to ask for help. The first time, she told me she would pray for me. The second time, she said I should look into temporary work so I wouldn't waste my good years on a lawsuit that probably wouldn't go anywhere. Danielle called once to tell me the lawsuit was a bad look, and that settling quickly and quietly would be better for my future employment prospects. She did not ask if I was eating. The only person who called regularly was Rosa. Rosa had been the front desk receptionist at the firm where I worked. She was 58 years old, a Dominican-American woman who kept a small oscillating fan on her desk regardless of the season and always had a bowl of hard candies available for anyone passing through the lobby. She had been laid off 3 weeks after me, not for reporting anything, but because the company was restructuring the administrative team, which was a clean way of saying they were eliminating positions held by women over 50. Rosa and I had not been particularly close at work. We were friendly in the easy, transactional way people are friendly when they share a building and a coffee machine. But the week I lost my job, she appeared at my apartment door with a foil-covered dish of rice and beans and a handshake that somehow communicated more care than anything my own family had managed. After that, she checked in every Thursday. She helped me proofread legal correspondence when I couldn't read straight anymore, from anxiety and exhaustion. When my heating unit broke in November, and the landlord took 10 days to fix it, she insisted I sleep at her place, on a pull-out sofa under 3 heavy quilts, eating breakfast at her kitchen table every morning like I belonged there. Rosa did not have much. She had a modest 1-bedroom apartment, a used sedan that needed new brakes, and a part-time cashier job she had taken after the layoff. She was also quietly managing a recurring issue with her left knee that required injections her insurance barely covered. She had mentioned it exactly twice, and immediately changed the subject both times, the way people who are used to carrying things alone tend to do. The Thursday the settlement cleared, I sat in my car in the bank parking lot for 20 minutes and stared at the balance on my phone. Then I drove home, made a cup of coffee, and opened my contacts. I typed a message to my sister Danielle. My car broke down on the way back from an interview. I'm on the shoulder of I-85 about 3 hours out, it's raining, and I only have $40 in my account. I need money for a tow and a hotel tonight. Can you help? I sent the same message to my mother. Then I put my phone face down on the counter and waited. Danielle responded in 4 minutes. Not with an offer, with a question about whether I had called roadside assistance. When I replied that my membership had lapsed because I couldn't afford the renewal fee, she wrote back, "Maya, you really need to get your finances organized. I'm at a client dinner. I can't deal with this right now." A few minutes later, as an afterthought, "I'll Venmo you $50 in the morning." My mother called. I let it ring twice before answering, and put a frantic tremble into my voice that matched the rain coming down outside my actual window. She listened. When I finished describing being stranded in the dark with no money and no plan, she exhaled the long, specific sigh she kept for situations she found beneath her full attention. "Maya, I have told you 100 times that you needed a more stable career. Your sister has an emergency fund. Your brother has an emergency fund. This is what happens when you spend your 20s chasing something impractical. I just need $200 to get through tonight. I am not going to keep bailing you out of situations your own choices created. You are almost 30 years old. Figure it out." The line went quiet, not angrily, just finished, the way you end a call when the conversation has run its natural course. I sat in my warm, perfectly functional car in my own driveway, the rain matching exactly the situation I had described, and felt something cold and very clarifying move through my chest. Not surprise, just confirmation. I called Rosa. I told her exactly where I was. I texted her my real address, because she was the one person in this scenario I wasn't testing. I told her I was stranded and needed help, and let her believe it, because asking Rosa for help was never something I had to feel ashamed of. "I'm coming," she said, without a single pause or a single question about who else I had tried. She drove 40 minutes to my door with a box of granola bars, 2 coffees, and $160 in an envelope she pressed into my hands with both of hers, saying it was the most she could pull out without touching her medical fund. She sat at my kitchen table for 2 hours, keeping me company while I played out the fiction of sorting through the car problem, talking about nothing in particular, making sure I wasn't alone. When she finally left, I watched her sedan pull out with the worn brakes and the back bumper sticker she'd had for 12 years, and I made myself a promise that had nothing to do with revenge. 2 weeks later, I drove to Atlanta for my mother's birthday weekend, the annual event that functioned more as a showcase for Danielle's accomplishments than as a celebration of anyone in particular. I wore my oldest jeans and a plain gray sweater. I parked at the end of the block. I wanted to look exactly the way they expected me to look. The minute I came through the door, Danielle looked up from the kitchen island and lifted her wine glass. "The unemployed artist makes her entrance. How's the lawsuit still dragging on?" "Still working through it," I said. My mother appeared from the hallway and took inventory of my outfit with one downward glance. "You could have dressed up a little. This isn't the kind of thing you show up to looking like you just came from moving boxes." Kevin was in the living room watching a game. He nodded at me from the couch with the minimal effort of someone who has decided not to get involved in anything. Dinner was the usual performance. Danielle talked for 40 minutes about a commercial real estate deal she described as transformative. My mother asked 3 follow-up questions about it for everyone she asked about my life. When I mentioned I was picking up freelance projects to stay occupied, Kevin smiled in the reflexive way of someone who has been finding low-level amusement in my situation for years. After the plates were cleared, Danielle reached below her chair and placed a manila folder on the table. She slid it toward me. The tab label read, "Property Transfer Voluntary." My father had passed 4 years ago. He'd been a quiet man who worked in commercial HVAC and spent his weekends refinishing furniture in the garage. He left the family home and his savings to my mother, but he left one specific asset solely to me. A small corner commercial lot he'd purchased in East Atlanta 30 years earlier when the neighborhood was mostly empty lots and boarded storefronts. It had sat unused for decades, generating nothing but an annual property tax bill. Danielle and my mother had referenced it for years, as evidence of my father's soft spot for me, overriding his practical judgment. He left Maya the one thing worth nothing, Danielle used to say, and my mother would smile in the way she reserved for comments she found accurate. This has been a liability on your taxes every year, Danielle said, her voice carrying the measured patience of someone accustomed to managing difficult clients. You can't afford your own rent, let alone a commercial property with no income. My company can take it as a write-off and give you $5,000. That's $5,000 more than it's earning you right now. I've kept it because Dad left it to me, I said. That's sentimental. This is financial reality. She paused. We're trying to help you. I'd like a few days to have someone look at the paperwork. The patience in Danielle's expression shifted slightly. My mother set down her coffee cup. What happened next was the part of the evening that stopped being ordinary. My mother walked to the china cabinet, opened the small top drawer, and removed a green velvet bag. She loosened the drawstring and set a delicate antique gold ring on the table in front of her. Her own mother's engagement ring, kept in that cabinet and shown to guests as one of the few genuine heirlooms in the house. This has been missing from this drawer for 3 weeks, she said, her voice going very quiet in the way it went when she had already made up her mind about something. I noticed it the last time Rosa was here. My stomach dropped in a very particular way. Rosa had come to help my mother with fall yard cleanup 6 weeks earlier. My mother had mentioned needing help before winter, and I had offered Rosa's time, which I had felt guilty about afterward. Rosa had been inside the house briefly. Rosa did not take that ring, I said. You can't know that for certain, Danielle said. She had moved from consultant to something with sharper edges. She was alone in the house for 20 minutes. Mom's been upset about this for weeks. She has a citation that was dismissed over a decade ago, I said, keeping my voice flat. That is not a record. Maya. My mother's voice was very controlled. I am not going to file a report if this is resolved tonight. Sign the papers, this goes away. Rosa's name stays clean. But if you leave without signing, I make a call tomorrow morning. Felony theft, given the ring's appraised value. She'd lose her cashier job. She would not work in a reputable place again. Danielle pushed the folder 2 inches closer. Is a piece of inherited land worth that? I looked at the folder on the table. I let my shoulders fall. I let my voice go quiet in the way that signals someone who has run out of options. Give me 72 hours, I said. I want to understand what I'm signing. I'll come back Thursday. Danielle exhaled, not relieved, because she had never doubted the outcome, but satisfied. Thursday, noon. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. I drove home that night with the folder on my passenger seat and my hands completely steady on the wheel. The moment I reached my apartment, I called my attorney. His name was Bernard Cole. I had retained him 2 months before the settlement cleared with a specific and unusual brief. Investigate 3 individuals quietly and report what you find before I announce what I have. Tuesday morning, he texted 4 words. Come in, bring coffee. Danielle's financial picture was a careful construction. Her consulting firm had not closed a meaningful contract in over a year. She was cycling minimum payments across $190,000 in business credit card debt, spread over 6 accounts. Her BMW lease was 60 days delinquent. 2 months prior, she had approached a commercial development firm preparing to build a mixed-use residential tower in East Atlanta, pitching herself as the real estate intermediary for acquiring anchor properties in the development zone. The developer had expressed strong interest in one specific parcel, a corner lot, my corner lot. The city had approved a major rezoning effort 4 months earlier. The East Atlanta neighborhood where my father had bought that empty corner 30 years ago sat directly in the path of a $400 million development corridor. My property sat at an intersection the developer needed for site access to the entire project. Without it, the construction plan required an expensive and time-consuming redesign. The developer had offered Danielle, believing she had authority to negotiate on behalf of the estate, $2.9 million for the parcel. Danielle had planned to collect a large commission, settle her debts, and report to our mother that the property had sold for significantly less. She needed my signature on that deed transfer because she could not legally sell what she did not own. She was offering me $5,000 for a $2.9 million asset, and she was using Rosa as the lever to pry it loose. Bernard set a second folder on his desk. My mother had co-signed a $220,000 business loan for Danielle's firm 18 months earlier, believing it was a short-term bridge that would be repaid in 6 months. Danielle had made 4 payments. The account was now in default. The lender had sent 2 collection notices to my mother's house, notices Kevin had intercepted and disposed of without telling her, because Kevin had borrowed $40,000 from the same loan and had no interest in that conversation happening. My mother did not know her credit score had dropped over 100 points. She did not know the collector had already sent a pre-litigation notice. She did not know her own home was being assessed as a potential asset for judgment collection if the loan went unpaid. I sat across from Bernard for a moment. "I want to call the developer directly," I said. "Today." He smiled slowly. "I thought you might." The developer's acquisition director met with me that afternoon. By 4 o'clock, we had agreed on $3.2 million. I held firm by simply stating that I had received interest from 2 other parties, which was marginally true and sufficiently credible. The wire transfer confirmed before the close of business. Thursday morning, I called Rosa. I told her what had been said about her at dinner. I told her no report was ever going to be filed, that her name was completely clean, and that she should not spend a single moment worrying. I told her to be available Saturday. She was quiet for a moment. "Did something happen, Maya?" "Something is about to happen," I said. "But not to you." Danielle had booked a small conference room at a downtown business center for noon Thursday, the kind of space rented by entrepreneurs who want to look more established than they are. When I arrived, she was already seated with a fresh copy of the deed and the same silver pen. My mother sat beside her. Kevin was by the window. No one commented on the blazer I was wearing, which they had never seen before. "Let's make this quick," Danielle said, sliding the document toward me. "I have a call at 1. I sat down. I placed my hands flat on the table and looked at the deed without reaching for it. "Before I sign, can you tell me which entity you're transferring this into?" Danielle said it was her corporate LLC. It didn't affect me. "Is that the same LLC that's currently in default on a $220,000 business loan my mother co-signed?" The room went very still. My mother turned toward Danielle. "What is she talking about?" Danielle's composure didn't break all at once. It receded, the way a tide goes out before you fully realize the change. "That loan is being managed. It's a temporary cash flow gap." I placed Bernard's folder on the table without opening it. "You've made 4 payments in 18 months, I said. "The account is in pre-litigation. The lender has already assessed Mom's home as a potential collection asset." I paused. "She doesn't know because Kevin has been intercepting the certified mail." Kevin pushed off the window. "That is not what happened. You borrowed $40,000 from the same loan," I said. "Which is why you've been very invested in making sure this conversation never took place." My mother pressed both hands flat on the table. "Kevin," she said, very quietly. Kevin opened his mouth and did not close it into anything useful. Danielle pivoted. It was the core skill of her professional life. "This doesn't change what's in front of you today. You have a property you can't manage and a signature that resolves everything." "The property sold yesterday afternoon," I said, "for $3.2 million. The pivot stopped. "That's not possible. The developer was working through me." "The developer was working through you until the actual legal owner of the property made herself available to negotiate directly." I kept my voice even. "I called the acquisition director Tuesday afternoon. He was happy to work with the principal. The transaction closed yesterday." I watched the number settle over her. 3.2 million. I watched her calculate what it meant: the commission gone, the debts still standing, the story she had been constructing for months about how this was all going to resolve itself. "You had no right to do that," she said, and her voice had gone thin in the way that means someone is working very hard not to come apart. "I built that relationship. I spent months positioning that deal." "You positioned it for yourself," I said. "You were going to pay me $5,000 for a property worth several $1,000,000 and keep the rest, without telling our mother or me what it was actually worth." My mother was looking at Danielle now, with an expression I had never seen on her face, Not the tight disappointment she kept from me, but something more like vertigo. "Danielle," she said, "did you know what it was worth?" Danielle didn't answer immediately. That was its own answer. I placed a certified account statement on the table printed that morning, reflecting both the settlement and the property sale. I didn't hand it to them. I let them read the number from where they sat. Kevin saw it first. His face moved through 3 different expressions in about 2 seconds. My mother stared at it the way you stare at something. You have fundamentally misclassified, not just wrong about the details, but wrong about the entire category. The settlement from my wrongful termination case closed last month, I said. Combined with the property, that is the current balance. Danielle had stopped speaking. She had spent 2 years treating me as a problem to be managed, a liability to minimize, a signature to obtain at the lowest possible cost. She had not accounted for the possibility that I had been building something she couldn't see from where she was standing. My mother looked up from the statement. "You let us think you were still struggling." "I was struggling," I said. "For a long time, I was genuinely struggling. And during that time, not one person in this room called to ask what I needed. Not once. But a woman you tried to have arrested called me every single Thursday and showed up at my door with her own money when I asked for help." My mother's hands tightened. "That situation was a misunderstanding." "There was no misunderstanding," I said. "Rosa did not take anything. You knew the accusation was thin, and you used it because it was available, and you believed it would work. That is not a misunderstanding. That is a decision." Danielle pulled her chair back slightly, creating distance the way people do when they're trying to separate themselves from a sinking structure. "If you want to be involved in resolving the loan situation as a family, we can talk about that. We can work something out together." "I spoke with the lender yesterday morning," I said. "I paid off the default balance, which removes the collection risk from Mom's property. Not as a favor to you, because Mom co-signed that loan without understanding what she was agreeing to, and she should not lose her home because of decisions you made without telling her." My mother went completely still. "Going forward," I said, "I am no longer available for conversations that begin with what I should sign, what I should accept, or what is realistic for someone in my position." I looked at Danielle directly. "You have significant debt, a lease that is delinquent, and a commission that is not coming. Those are yours to solve. I will not be solving them." Danielle looked at me for a long moment. The confident self-assurance that had been her defining feature for as long as I had known her was simply not there. What remained was recognizable and smaller. A person who had been making poor decisions for years inside a structure that had always protected her from their full consequences, and who had finally reached the edge of that structure. She didn't beg. I hadn't expected her to, and she didn't. She took her copy of the unsigned deed, put it in her bag, and stood up. She looked at my mother once, a complicated look that contained more than either of them would ever say out loud, and walked out of the conference room without speaking further. Kevin followed, which was the most decisive thing I had ever seen him do. My mother and I sat across from each other in the quiet room. "I did not know what the property was worth," she said finally. It wasn't an apology. It was a fact she was processing out loud. "I believe that," I said. She looked at her hands. "I said things to you over the years. I pushed you toward Danielle's path because I thought I was protecting you from uncertainty. I thought stability meant a certain kind of job. You were protecting your idea of what my life should look like," I said. "Not my actual life." She didn't argue with that. It was possibly the most honest exchange we had ever had, and I left it exactly where it was. Saturday morning, I drove to Rosa's apartment with a bag of good coffee and a leather folder. She opened the door in her robe, looked at my face, and stepped back to let me in. We sat at her kitchen table, the same table where I had eaten toast and tried not to cry for 3 months straight. She poured the coffee and waited, in the specific patient way she had of giving her full attention to things that deserved it. "I need to tell you some things," I said. "And then I need to give you something." I told her about the settlement. I told her about the property and what it had sold for. I told her about the accusation my family had made and exactly how I had made certain it would never reach anyone who could act on it. She listened to all of it without interrupting. When I finished, I slid the leather folder across the table. She looked at it without opening it. "Maya, please open it." Inside was a certified letter from a property management company confirming the purchase and full title transfer of a two-bedroom condominium 4 miles from her current apartment in a building with an elevator, an in-unit laundry, and a covered parking space. Below that was a statement from a medical payment account I had funded to cover 2 full years of her knee injections and any related procedures without touching her existing insurance. And beneath that was a letter from a private investment account opened in her name, with an initial deposit size to generate a real quarterly dividend for as long as she wanted to keep it. Rosa read the first document slowly, then the second, then the third. She set them down and held her coffee cup with both hands and looked out her kitchen window for a while without saying anything. "This is too much," she said. "It isn't," I said. "I was just doing what anybody would do." "No," I said. "You were doing what you would do. That's different." She turned back from the window. Her eyes were full, but her face was steady, the same steadiness she had brought to every Thursday phone call and every quiet bowl of rice and beans left at a door with no conditions attached. "You didn't have to do all this," she said. "I know I didn't have to," I said. "I wanted to." She reached across the table and put her hand over mine. She didn't say anything for a moment. "Your father left you that property," she said quietly. "You think he knew what it would be worth someday?" I thought about my father in the garage on Saturday mornings, refinishing the legs of a chair no one else would have bothered saving, doing careful, quiet work, because he believed things had worth even when other people couldn't see it yet. "I think he might have," I said. We stayed at her kitchen table for another hour, finishing the coffee while the morning light moved in slow angles across the floor. Outside, the neighborhood was doing what it does on Saturday mornings, unhurried and ordinary, and full of people just trying to get through the week without losing anything they couldn't afford to lose. I had spent the previous 14 months believing the worst thing that had ever happened to me was being forced out of a job I had worked very hard to build. I understood now that it was the most clarifying thing that had ever happened to me, not because difficulty builds character, which is the kind of thing people say when they want suffering to mean something it doesn't, but because it showed me exactly who would stay and who would leave, and who would drive 40 minutes in the dark with granola bars and $160 in an envelope just because I called. Family is not a fact of biology. It is a repeated choice. It is the person who calls on Thursday with nothing to gain. It is the hand that stays extended after you've already given everything you have. I lost the family I was assigned, but I found the one I actually needed. And sitting in that small, bright kitchen with the one person who had shown up without conditions, I realized I wasn't thinking about what I had lost at all. If this story stayed with you, hit like and subscribe to Recovery Stories for more. Tell me in the comments, has someone outside your family ever showed up for you in a way your own family never did? I read every single one,